This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In today's episode, I'm joined by Conor Spacey. Conor is the Culinary Director of FoodSpace. FoodSpace is a contract catering company focusing on sustainability and responsible food sourcing. In today's conversation, Conor discusses the challenges involved in tackling sustainability in business. You'll hear about FoodSpace's journey towards reducing its carbon footprint, the reasons why Conor advocates for better food systems, and the importance of bringing customers along on the sustainability journey. Let's dive in. Conor Spacey, who is the executive chef for FoodSpace.
That's it, yeah.
What are your other titles at FoodSpace?
I've moved more into, I suppose, a culinary director role. So it's kind of more overseeing our future business, planning ahead in terms of our carbon footprint and where we want to be in the future, and also training all our fantastic chefs across the country in sustainable food methods, deep diving into our procurement, working directly with farmers, working better with farmers in terms of how they farm and how we can help them have a sustainable livelihood. So there's kind of a lot of different elements.
Yeah. FoodSpace. Tell me, what is FoodSpace?
FoodSpace is a contract catering company. So basically, if you can imagine, we run, I hate the word canteens, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's canteens predominantly across Ireland, some here in the UK for clients. So we feed thousands of people at work every day, be it breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Thousands? So how many meals?
Before COVID, we were at about 2 million a year.
Okay.
So and we're getting
significant.
Yeah. We're kind of getting back there.
Not your corner cafe.
Not your corner cafe, yeah. Some big numbers on a daily basis that make up that 2 million. So we're very conscious of deep diving into our responsibilities, cooking for that many people, you know, how we procure our food, where it comes from, not only locally, but globally. So we kind of deep dive into that. And then we look at when we have our food, where that goes in terms of production waste, plate waste, and how we work with that. And then we look at our carbon footprint, which is very much a focus for us in the last few years, and how we can reduce that, as well as feeding people well. But what we try to do is feed people well and feed the planet well. So we're trying to showcase, like FoodSpace kind of morphed into, not only is it about feeding people every day, it became this kind of platform for showcasing change and educating our teams as well as our customers into what a better planet looks like, what a better food system looks like. So FoodSpace kind of, because we were doing the work and then we started talking about it, we unintentionally became this platform that is used outside of our cafes and restaurants as well, and more in around talks with different companies and NGOs all about food systems and how we can all make an impact.
One of the things we talk a lot about is good food, and what does good food mean to you? How would you talk about good food? You've talked a little bit about better climate impacts, better for people. How would you describe good food?
You know what? It's kind of changed over the years, because originally good food to me was about feeding people well and less attention paid to the how we were feeding people well. So it was more about, it was about nutrition and ensuring that people had a balanced diet. But over time within FoodSpace, it became, hang on a minute, we need to make sure the planet is well as well. You know, so it's not just about feeding people well, it's about how do you do it with a less footprint, reducing your carbon, with feeding people well and ensuring that we're not damaging the planet. And so what feeding people well meant 8 years ago maybe is very different to what it means today. So today it's not about using food because it's nutritious. If that food has been farmed in a harmful way or grown in a harmful way, or has had, different labor working on the farms that haven't been paid well, where the farmers aren't paid well, where, it's not humanly sustainable as well as planetary sustainability. So that's all played a part now in deciding how and what we use and how we feed people well, making sure that the food coming in the back door has reached us, and along the entire food chain, everyone has been sustainably, their livelihoods, their pay, the food has been handled. So it's a bit more, I won't say complicated, it's just a lot more thought got into it.
Thoughtful.
Yeah, a lot more thoughtful.
As a chef, do you spend much time in the kitchen now?
A lot less.
Yes.
Yes, I've been very lucky. We have teams of chefs in FoodSpace that have been with us from day one. We're heading into 8 years, almost 9 years now, and they've been with us on that journey. And as we've opened new places, we've brought in new teams, and they all get very excited about it. And then my role has been more stepping out of the kitchen and more overseeing everything that where there's food. So I spend a lot of time, depending on the season. So as we're coming into the summer now, I'll go back on the road visiting farms and looking at how they're doing and how we can help, because I look at it as a responsibility. If you're feeding 2 million people a year, you have a bag of money that you need to buy ingredients. So I'm very conscious of where we spend that and where it's actually going. So I could spend a lot of time on procurement. I spend a lot of time on food development, which is more about developing new dishes, and we have a development team with us, and it's about developing new dishes and ideas that reduce carbon footprint. And then it's working with our marketing team on how do we market new ideas to our customers. And so it's kind of become a bigger role that it's less within the kitchens, but more about working with everybody along the line.
It's almost like you're the food curator.
That's actually a good term.
You're curating a collection of food across multiple sites.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost a little bit like an art curator. But
you're kind of looking
selecting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? And the thing is, which I'm very much guilty of, but I think it's a positive, is that I'm never satisfied. So I never go, we're doing that well. To me, it's always, we can do better. And I think that's always been our thing in FoodSpace. We've never turned around and go, that's great, we've done that, tick a box. Because what we did last year, I look at improving this year and set new goals. And then next year, I'll set new goals based on the goals we reached this year. So it's constantly pushing the envelope, and because food is very changeable, and it's looking at everything and going, what can we do better? There's always ways to improve. And then it's working to make sure that our customers understand it. And that's a whole, we have a great marketing team that get on board with that, and they kind of, to get inside my head, as they always laugh at, which is not an easy thing, and take those things and go, so how do we talk about that? So how do we, in the restaurants, how do we market all this great stuff we're doing so that our customers see it and see that we're going to that length to make sure.
As you've kind of journeyed on this journey around kind of advocating for different types of issues and food, what's one thing that you've learned that's changed the way that you approach things and that you bring into this, like for other advocates that are listening and thinking about how do we be effective? What's something that you've learned?
The biggest thing I learned a few years ago was within the Chef's Manifesto, and that was that food is global. We always talk about geographically where we are in local food, and I get that, and that's important, and we do a lot of that, but you can't ignore the bigger picture. You can't ignore what's going on the planet, even if you're not affected by it immediately, in terms of climate change, in terms of how food is grown and produced, and how soil health, and all these things that we don't necessarily link to food on the plate. And that was something I learned a lot with Chef's Manifesto, is that it's all linked through, and you can't put yourself in a silo and go, well, I'm on the island of Ireland, and I have great local farmers, and I tick a box, so I'm okay. There's more to it than that. You have to think globally, because, so if I take Ireland, the island of Ireland as an example, yes, we have lots of fantastic farmers, and yes, we use lots of local food, but we also have to import. We also like cacao, chocolate, coffee, tea, spices, sugars. You can't ignore what else is going on within the food industry globally, and to help advocate for a better system on the entire food system. That's something I really learned through different discussions with different chefs from different countries. Because when I would talk about Ireland, I actually picked up a sense of, actually, you know what, I don't realize how lucky I am to be where I am geographically. Because of our climate, we can produce great food, but you can't just bury your head in the sand and go, well, I'm okay. That doesn't work. You got to think globally, because we're all affected by a global food system.
So you're obviously quite a deep thinker on this stuff, and you've obviously gone through some steps. How do you go about bringing other people on the journey to understand good food? Like, how do you kind of reach out to the customers, the people coming into your cafes? What's some of the tips and tricks that you've done?
What I've learned by my mistakes, which is the best way to learn actually, was at the beginning of FoodSpace, I would go gun-ho. So I would go in and go, we're doing ABC. So we're not doing farm fish, we're not doing avocados, we're not doing palm oil, we're not doing, So when we would take over a cafe in our industry, things would change overnight. And I'd upset a lot of people. Because don't forget, your customers, even though we're new, they could be there 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So they have habits, be it good or bad. And I would come in and go, well, we're not doing that. And I haven't spoke about the journey and why. So people would get upset and go, well, hang on, I've always eaten this, or I've always looked for that. It's not here anymore. What's going on? Who's these FoodSpace guys, and why have they changed everything that I do?
Yeah.
And I learned the hard way that actually kind of that doesn't work. You have to bring people on a journey. You have to really tell a story through food, through our marketing, and talk about what we're doing and why before you do it. So when we make changes, we kind of talk about a month, 2 months out before we do it. And we explain through different marketing materials, through demos, through talks within our restaurants, why we're about to change a certain item or take a certain item off the menu, or why we're changing what we do, through ingredients, and why we ban certain ingredients. There's no point, you can't go do it and then talk about it, because people, you're not bringing people, you've gone a step ahead of your customers. And to bring them on a journey, you need to talk about it and explain it before you do it. My biggest mistake was going in gun-ho, change everything. And people were upset because you change everything. So it was like, this is not working.
So how's that work now?
It works much better. Now I explain before we do it.
That lead kind of,
yeah.
Here's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and this is why.
And this is why.
Yeah.
And then when it happens, they appreciate
it. They appreciate it, and we show solutions. So if we're delisting an ingredient because it's not sustainable, and the farmer hasn't been paid well, whereas human rights issues and so much, depending on what it is, now we explain it before we do it. Or we explain what we're going to use instead about a month before we do it. And people get that journey and they go, okay, this makes sense. So I get that. So I know when I come in next week, this is gone and this is why, and this is what I can have instead. And I learned that you got to hold their hands and bring them on the journey. You got to, because otherwise they get lost and they're a bit like, hang on, why has everything changed? Where's all my food that I enjoyed on my menu? Where's all this gone? And that doesn't work, because you just actually annoyed people rather than, and I don't mean we're educating them, they're intelligent people, but we're giving them the information to see where we're coming from and why.
So would you, in terms of, if you fast forward 10 years, what would you say is where you hope to be with FoodSpace?
Our biggest concentration moment is our carbon reduction. And that's a big ask, because it's not just around food, it's our energy, it's our waste, it's how our food is transported. There's a lot of different sides to it, but we're really on that journey about being as close to carbon neutral, if not carbon neutral, as much as we can be. But we need the buy-in from the public to get there, because we can put carbon reduced food, we can make carbon neutral food where we can weigh it up against where it's come, where it's farmed, how it's traveled, and so on. But if people aren't eating it, well, then we're out of business, because we have to be financially sustainable as well. So you're trying to be a commercial business and make change. And our goal in FoodSpace is to really drive that change and set these goals and achieve them. And achieve goals. So every year we set out goals, 3 to 4 at the beginning of every year, throughout that year, that brings us to the next 10 years, where we can really stand there and go, I want to be carbon neutral, but sometimes there's certain things I can't change. But when it comes to food, I think we can, because I think we get lost in what sustainability means. Because what sustainability means 10 years ago, what sustainability means now is two different things. Because if we say now we want to be sustainable, that means we want to sustain the level where we're at, which is not good enough, because we actually need to reverse it. Where we talked about, especially around soil health and working more with regenerative farming, where soil captures carbon and through better farming methods, where not only do we stop it, CO2 emissions, we can actually reverse climate change. And that's where I think FoodSpace's responsibility is really looking deep into the farmers. So to me, they're the heroes. We're kind of,
Yeah.
we need to work better with them, and we need to understand why they can't do certain things at the moment, be it for financial reasons, be it for climate reasons, why they can't get more into regenerative farming, where there's no inputs into the soil, but there's good outputs. And it's trying to work with farmers as well as much as chefs to drive that change, because a lot of it is habit.
Over the years, what's one thing that you've kind of maybe made as a mistake that you've gone, I really wish I'd known that, or I could have learned from that, in the past?
I think at the beginning of FoodSpace, it wasn't so much within FoodSpace, it was more before that as a chef, where I was more interested in what was on the plate in terms of flavor and visual effects, how it looked as a client, and get the feedback that they enjoyed that, more so than how it actually got there.
Yeah.
I didn't pay as much attention as a younger chef I wanted this creativity to produce food that people enjoyed, but I didn't pay as much attention to where it came from.
Yeah.
And the effects it had globally and locally. If something tasted good, if an ingredient tasted good, and yes, I worked within the seasons, but working in the seasons doesn't necessarily mean you're sustainable either.
No.
So I didn't pay as much attention, and I wish the younger me did that then.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, often we learn these things in a hard, long way.
Yeah.
But I suppose, when I think about some of the success you've had, it's also because you've had that integrity of really going back and looking at where does that stuff come from? And then your food speaks for itself, but at the same time, people are really interested in that story behind the food.
Yeah, and you know what? The more interested now than you've ever been. At the beginning, even the beginning of FoodSpace, which is not that long ago when we think about it, people kind of went, oh, okay, that's different, but not understanding why we were doing it. And maybe it's kind of post-COVID that has, if you can take anything positive out of that, maybe that people realize how vulnerable we are on the planet, not just in your country. And maybe that's opened people's eyes, because I know that the more we do now, the better the reaction we get than what we got 9 years ago or 8 years ago. If that makes sense. People understand it better. They mightn't always agree with it, which is great, because I'm happy to have that kind of debate. And I'm not saying that we're always right, but we always try to put our best foot forward and talk about, what we can do better. And it's kind of good that not everyone agrees, because that fuels a deeper conversation, and whereby we can go, actually, that makes sense now. That actually, we've had this discussion before about, I always kind of go back, this always sits in the back of my brain, about organic farming versus non-organic farming. And for me, it always made sense. You think of organic farming and that was the future. But then when you talk to farmers who 90% of the time farm organically, but don't want to be certified organic because of sustainable livelihoods. And an example was a farmer we worked with for many years, and maybe, 7 years ago, they had a blight on the crop, and they needed to spray the crop to kill the blight. So the alternative was the crop failed, they had no income, and they would lose the farm because they couldn't pay the mortgage. This is what I learned as I go on this journey, is that sustainability means different things to different people. And sustainability now is just as important from a human point of view as it is from a food and planet point of view. And that goes back to farmers and seeing that, they're probably definitely the hardest working people in the food chain, and they're at the beginning and paid the least. And that doesn't sit well. And it's kind of learning from them and going, okay, so why are you in the situation you're in? And how do we who spend money help you to make that better?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, it goes deeper than, as I said, where years ago as a young chef, I was more interested in just textures and flavors on a plate and presentation. I'm still interested in that, but I'm not using ingredients that just are there because of a certain texture or add a certain flavor to a dish. That's irrelevant to me anymore. It's about where that food has come from and why.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So that changes your whole perspective on how a dish.
So given that, two questions I want to ask everyone. What's your favorite ingredient? And what is your favorite meal?
You know what? My favorite ingredient kind of changes throughout the year, and probably changes the more I travel and try new things. Because as a chef, and even as an eater, never mind as a chef, food excites people, and trying new things is exciting. So what's favorite now might not be favorite in 2-3 months when something else comes in the season. Like, so where I am in Ireland, I'm on the East Coast, and we're straight into berry season now.
Yeah.
So like raspberries and strawberries and loganberries, and you know that they're plentiful. We're in that season. Usually depends on the weather, about 2 months, and I love them. I stop on the side of the road in my car. I buy, put it off a farmer. You get in your car and you eat them as a snack, and that's my favorite this time of the year. While in the winter it's more, you know, in autumn it's more around mushrooms and spinaches and different kind of greens and kales and so on. So it kind of changes throughout the year. I kind of love all different types of food when they're at their best.
Is there something you're experimenting though with?
Yeah, we're experimenting a lot with beans at the moment, a hell of a lot with beans. And the thing is that in Ireland, and this is the thing I've learned as well, that beans are beans, the family, but what a bean is different in each country. So in Ireland, beans are more traditionally peas, French beans, broad beans. That's the more traditional beans that are seasonal and served fresh from the pod. And we use a lot of them, but then to double the consumption of beans, we're using more, and we're getting more into using dried beans. And yes, they've traveled, but it's making that balance and going, okay, so the fresh beans or peas and so on, like that family that grow in Ireland, are only available for about 2 months of the year, and that's it. So it's about looking at everything else within that family and the legume family and so on, and using more of that. So myself and our development team have been really working on taking out other ingredients, especially as we come out of seasons within Ireland, and the hunger gap, which went a lot longer this year, was kind of like 3 months, 4 months, which should be only a month. We use a lot more of that, and use a lot more of it in our dishes, and come up with really fantastic different dishes that people got excited about. Got excited with the flavour. And again, as I talked about before, we would put these on our menus, get people to try them, and they go, oh, that's delicious. And then we would talk about beans as how, and then we would talk about, you know, how do we increase consumption and what that means for a planet. That's how we've tended to find, as I said, from mistakes before, is to talk to people, communicate why you're doing something, get them to taste it and get them to enjoy it, and then talk about why and what that means on a planetary level.
And your favourite meal?
My favourite meal at the moment is very simple. When we're in this season, we're now in summer, it's kind of like a barbecue, but of vegetables rather than meat.
What sort of veg?
Kind of like, I love greens.
Berries?
No, I love my greens, like broccolis and even onions, or red onions and peppers and mushroom, and all kind of like really charred and grilled and just served with a fantastic dip. Like a lovely hummus and some, but made out of whatever peas or beans are available. And they're lovely. And that's me, and a nice bread. Very, very simple, but delicious.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Conor. Really good to talk to you. Looking forward to hearing more about FoodSpace in the coming years.
Thanks very much.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.